turn my body pack on here. Good evening to each of you, and we are going to be going over translations, modern translations here with this lesson tonight, and have actually a question for you guys before we get started. But before we get to those questions, let's sing together number 161. 161, if you have that, or you can follow along on the screens. Love divine, all loves excelling. Love divine, all loves excelling, joy of heaven to earth come down. Fix in us thy humble dwelling, all thy faithful mercies crown. Jesus, thou art all compassion, pure unbounded love thou art. Visit us with thy salvation, enter every trembling heart. Breathe, oh, breathe thy loving spirit into every troubled breast. Let us all in thee inherit, let us find the promised rest. Take away the love of sin, Alpha and Omega be, and of faith as its beginning, set our hearts at liberty. Come, Almighty, to deliver, let us all thy grace receive. Suddenly return and never, never more thy temples leave. Thee we would be always blessing, serve thee as thy hosts above. Pray and praise thee without ceasing, glory in thy perfect love. Finish then thy new creation, pure and spotless let us be. To our great salvation, perfectly secured in thee. Change from glory into glory, till in heaven we take our place, till we cast our crowns before thee, lost in wonder, love, and praise. Very good. Before we go on to our next song, I just wanted to ask, at the very start of this series, I asked a bunch of questions, and I said, what are questions you have about how we got the Bible, or biblically related questions that you have? And for a lot of the answers to those questions, I said, yep, we have a lesson on that. Yep, we have a lesson on that. Now, next week, I'm answering what was one of Zach's questions to me, which had a lot to do with Old Testament higher criticism. For instance, Abraham, just a classic example is it calls Abraham Ur of the Chaldees. Well, do your history. The Chaldeans weren't around until after Abraham, and so why is Abraham called Ur of the said that he's from Ur of the Chaldees? That's an interesting question. And there are other Old Testament higher criticism questions that come up. I'm going to do a lesson on the New Testament canon and get a little bit into the Protestant canon versus the Catholic canon of Scripture, talk about the Apocrypha. Are there any other questions that you had about anything related to how we got the Bible, or specific bibliology questions that have not been talked about thus far? If you think of it, yeah.
Michael Heiser talks about some of the New Testament authors quoting from 1 Peter, which is not enough. And I'd be interested in
That might be a good question to at least toss in the canon one, but I will, yeah. And then, yeah, does Peter quote from Enoch and stuff like that? Yep. Good. Other questions related to bibliology? All right. If you think of it, it was one of those things. When Zach asked me his question over at the trash can, he was, yeah. So if you need to wait till you see me buy a trash can, that I understand. That's all good. It's all good. So that's right. Try not. And there are people who think the Codex Sinaiticus thing, right? Oh, anyway. That's right. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. Very good. Okay, let's sing our next song together, number 388, He Will Hold Me Fast.
When I fear my faith will fail, Christ will hold me fast. When the tempter would prevail, He will hold me fast. I could never keep my hold through life's fearful path, for my love is often cold. He must hold me fast. He will hold me fast. He will hold me fast. For my Savior loves me so. He will hold me fast. Those He saves are His delight. Christ will hold me fast. Precious in His holy sight, He will hold me fast. He'll not let my soul be lost. His promises shall last. Bought by Him at such a cost, He will hold me fast. He will hold me fast. He will hold me fast. For my Savior loves me so. He will hold me fast. For my life He bled and died. Christ will hold me fast. Justice has been satisfied. He will hold me fast. Raised with Him to endless life, He will hold me fast. Till our faith is turned to sight, when He comes at last, He will hold me fast. He will hold me fast. For my Savior loves me so. He will hold me fast.
Very good. I'll have you stand up once before we, for our lesson tonight, number 186 in the supplemental hymn books. And I know the tune to it, generically speaking, but every now and then the rhythm messes me up. So I'll need the music in front of me for this one. Number 186 in the supplemental. Go ahead and stand if you're able. We'll sing the two verses of it.
Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. When I feel afraid, you think I've lost my way, still you're there right beside me, and nothing will I fear as long as you are near. Please be near me to the love for me, and yet my heart forever is wandering. Jesus, be my guide, and hold me to your side, and I will love you to the end. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path. Amen. You may be seated. I was thinking in terms of bibliology, two things about this song. One is what the truth that it's teaching there from Psalm 119. Word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. And it comes very close to the verse which says, how can a young man keep his way pure? By paying attention to your word. And of course, Psalm 119, it's like every single verse has some sort of implication. I believe it's everything but two of the verses actually either use precepts or statutes or word or one of these Bible-related words. And the other two come very close to implying that that's what it's talking about. So feet and path and light. That God has not given us in his word all of the answers for every single thing that's going to happen in the future. Sometimes we tend to think that way, that I can be absolutely dogmatic about every single thing that's going to happen in eternity future. That's not actually the case. God has given us everything we need for life and godliness. He's given me everything I need to obey him today. God has not, in his word, given me everything that I need to know about everything. I'm not going to learn how to be a rocket scientist from, the Bible. But he's given me what I need for today, to follow God today. And so it's communication to us. And then the other thing is, a lot of what we have preserved in our singing, we were all saying thy word instead of your word. And there's one, we can thank the King James, honestly, for a lot of the language that's been preserved even in our hymnody. That's the English language that people used in their hymnody for a long time. And so I don't balk at that. Like I said, I prefer to preach from a more modern translation, make sure I'm doing clarity, but there is something to be said for a thankful view of history. And so one of the things I have for you tonight to enjoy after to mess around with in the back, I have just a few of the translations that I occasionally reference from my library. All the way to the right, I have it's not really a translation, it's an interlinear. And so you can see what it would look like to have a truly word-for-word translation. That particular interlinear is from the Trinitarian Bible Society. I don't come to all the same conclusions so far as textual criticism that the Trinitarian Bible Society comes to, but they put out a nice interlinear Bible. Not the greatest if you wear glasses and stuff like that. You about need a magnifying glass to see some of what they have in there. But then I have New King James back there, CSB, which is the updated HCSB, and I think I liked the HCSB better, but they made some updates. We'll talk about that. I have the ESV back there, a truly 1611 King James, just without the Apocrypha, the LSB, and something else that I can't tell quite what I have back there. So those are for you to look at. Also, did everyone get one of these? They were in the hallway. I made 25 copies. Hopefully there was enough for everybody. And so that was back there for you. If you didn't get one, anyone still need one? Okay, one or two, George, two or three. Yeah, wave down George when he comes back in and you can get one. This clicker's never where I need it. My fault. I've adapted this. 95% of this is from Bill Combs, who was a professor at Detroit Baptist Theological Seminary. And if you're really interested to dive deeper than I will be able to get to tonight into the translation-specific thing, I was doing my study on on this whenever I was putting this together the first time I did it. And this guy, professors and their weirdness, I tell you, he put together a lesson, and this is all his stuff. Just single-spaced and just like, and this was a Sunday school lesson that he taught at his church. Lots of really good stuff. And my uncle-in-law, Grace's uncle, was good friends with this guy, and he's like, hey, if you have guys you can send this to and they can use it. And it came at the perfect time because it was right in the middle of my research the first time I taught this class. But I have the whole PDF. So that said, if any of you would like the PDF, just shoot me an email or a text, and I can shoot the PDF off to you via email. And he goes into even more detail, like he gives 5 or 6 points as to the various things surrounding the New English Bible, the NIV, the New American Bible. Like, he really goes into details and gives multiple paragraphs kind of summarizing the flavor of each Bible version. So it's deeper than I'll go tonight. I'll direct your attention to the screen. When we're talking about Bible translations, I went over this in the first lesson. There's no such thing as a word-for-word translation. That would not make any sense. You can't do that. For instance, in Spanish, when the illustration I always use is you say me gusta if you say I like something, but what you're really saying in Spanish is that this other thing pleases me. They don't say I like that. Once you start saying I like that, you're talking about something that you have some kind of a familial, fond affection, or maybe like a love romantic relationship with. Once you start saying you like things in that way in Spanish, but they don't say that. They say it pleases me. And so that would be a little weird if you just went around for your Spanish-speaking friend and translate every time they said that, saying, it pleases me, and it would get weird. And so not a good translation. So you can't really do word-for-word translation regardless of what you're talking about. So is word by word a little better? Maybe. That's on one end of preference when it comes to Bible translation. On the other end of preference is thought for thought. And the idea here is that you don't want, if you're going to make a translation, and frankly, this is how I would approach it even in terms of business transactions and just like modern day speaking. If I was sightseeing, I would want a thought-for-thought translation. I don't need to know all the ins and outs of the grammatical purpose of Mandarin Chinese. I'm not going to be able to invest the time to figure out what all is going on there. And so if I'm sightseeing in China and I have a Mandarin Chinese translator, I want him to tell me what's going on in my language. I don't want to look anything up. I don't want to do any extra study. And I actually prefer a thought-for-thought translation when it comes to that kind of thing. I do lean more toward the word by word. And so the other terms that you'll see used is formal equivalency or a literal translation. But just understand, we're not talking about something where you can go absolutely word for word. It wouldn't make any sense. You can just try to read through my interlinear back there. Unless you know Hebrew and Greek, you won't know what's going on, other than, hey, there's a word I recognize from that verse, that kind of thing. And then the other terms used for kind of the thought-for-thought translation are dynamic equivalency or functional translation. And then I got to my notes, and Combs uses a different word. He uses correspondence instead of equivalence. So all different terms meaning the same thing. So this was something I found, just a free picture I snagged off the internet, made sure it was public domain and all that jazz. And it is less complicated. So on the more word-for-word side of things is the NASB, and if you read through the NASB, you'll see this. It's very wooden, sticks very close to the Hebrew and Greek without being a totally foreign language, but it is definitely not as smooth in terms of Englishy feeling as when compared to the ESV or the NIV or NLT. But once you get into the NIV and NLT territory, then you're talking more of a thought-for-thought idea. And then there's other stuff we haven't talked about, like the Message, which is not a translation. It's a paraphrase, and I have some excerpts from that I may be able to share as we go throughout tonight as well. Let's see, yes, let me say one thing about this. there's a large discussion out there so far as, well, forget the word for word and thought for thought thing. The big issue is you have good Bible manuscripts out there and you have bad Bible manuscripts out there. And I had another lesson somewhat touching on this. In general, I just don't deal with that argument very much. Someone might want to say, well, we only use the Textus Receptus. The problem with that is there are about 36 plus Textus Recepti. There's not one Textus Receptus. And so an example would be like 1 John 5:7, which 1 John 5:7 is not in any of the Textus Receptus manuscripts. But then people who say that the best manuscripts are Textus Receptus manuscripts will say, well, 1 John 5:7 was quoted by the church fathers, and therefore it must have been in a Textus Receptus manuscript somewhere back there. To which I would say, now we're no longer talking about Textus Receptus. Now we're talking about church father onlyism, I guess. So this is why I don't get into that. I would gladly invite anyone who based their translation out of the Textus Receptus or the majority text, or had more of an reasoned eclectic approach to textual criticism, which is the camp that I fall into at the moment. It's a complicated discussion so far as which manuscripts are the best. But what God has done, again, God has not given us a situation in which there are like this set of golden tablet manuscripts, and that's the one where he put his stamp of approval on it and said, never shalt thou alter these. You have some manuscripts that say Jesus Christ, come to another manuscript that says Christ Jesus. And it's the same passage, and that's a lot of the times when you hear about thousands and thousands of differences, 99% of those differences involve something like that. When you get into more complicated differences than that, or if you have a verse or a paragraph missing, even in these instances, you'll have the exact phrase used maybe 3 or 4 verses later, or something like the longer ending of Mark. All of that information is in the book of Acts. And so I've yet to come across any textual variation. I was like, oh no, this concerns me. I'm going to have to abandon my faith because of this. The differences, I've asserted this many times, and I'll assert it again. The differences between Spanish and English are more significant than the textual variants in the Greek manuscripts or in the Hebrew manuscripts. There's more variation to be found just between the differences between 2 modern languages than the differences that are in the textual variants of Scripture, because of ways that we just don't say that. So for instance, I don't know of any translation that translates millstone, donkey stone, but that's what the Greek says. The Greek says donkey stone. That's what it says. But I don't know a single English translation that says that. And so it's, so that's a difference, but not an important one at the time. And, that kind of gives you an insight too, right? They used a donkey to go around the mill. And so don't get caught up in that's my pastoral advice. Don't get caught up in the best manuscripts arguments. Okay. Oh, one other thing I wanted to say about that is for people who do prefer the Textus Receptus, I would encourage you to read Scrivener's preface to the Textus Receptus, and I have a link to that in case you're watching this and you needed that. There's a great website, kjbhistory.com, that has lots of good stuff on it, getting into history and the King James Bible and Textus Receptus issues, all of that. So that's as much as I'll say about that. There are some times where we can see that people were trying to assert something if they didn't believe that Jesus was God, and there are some manuscripts that have certain words sort of angrily scratched out and things, and you can tell, somebody didn't like a particular theology. So there's some of that, but honestly, that's extremely rare. And most of the accusations that you hear about of people who are trying to tamper and all of this, you would need like worldwide control and manipulation to be able to pull this off, and it just does not appear to be the case that has happened. What I have on the screen right here is an example of an interlinear Bible, and I have some examples in front of me, and maybe you have examples in front of you. I'm just curious, I presume that each of you probably brought your favorite translation tonight, so who has tonight with them a King James? King James. Who has NASB? Thought I'd see a hand or two over here, yeah. What else is represented? CSB? Okay, so you have like 1,500 translations. Nice, okay. Yeah. Good. Logos is fun. Other translations? And let me ask a follow-up question. What's something that you really appreciate about not everyone has to share, of course, but what's something that has been a blessing? Is there a particular verse or anything that you're like, I like how this one says it? Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast of a women's Bible study that was actually one part of the church in California, and the teachers there like have master's degrees,
Yeah.
just like a person that's uneducated. And this one woman happened to be from the CSB, and she said, "I like this version because it sounds just like how I talk." That's what I had felt all along.
I was going to use that. I was going to use that phrase tonight about the CSB. It's one of the things that when I read the CSB, that's one of the thoughts I have is I talk like this. And I think that they'll demonstrate that. The text that I chose to be representative tonight is from the book of Ruth. And so you can follow along in whatever translation you have, and maybe we'll get to your translation that you have. But I'm going to give you a truly word-for-word translation of Hebrew with a little help from my Hebrew interlinear here, off of Logos Bible software. So ask Sherry about Logos. Okay. And Boaz, he went up the gate, and he sat there. And behold, the next of kin passing by, that said Boaz, and he said, "Turn away, sit here, so-and-so friend." And he turned away, and he sat. And he took 10 men, heads the town, and he said, "Here sit." And they sat. And he said, "To Redeemer, the land, the tract of land that our brother Elimelech, she is selling, Naomi, the returning, the territory, Moab. And I thought I would open your ear to say, buy, before the sitting ones and before the heads, my people. And you want, and you redeem. And if no, you redeem, tell to me, so that I know, for there is not except you to redeem, and I after you." And he said, I redeem. All right, so that was some fun stuff. Okay, and were I to preach from that every single week, most of you would be pretty frustrated by that. There's all the way to your left, on your chart in front of you, I've put all the way to the left as to the most word-for-word translation that I know, and it can still technically be called a translation, is the Emphasized Bible by Joseph Bryant Rotherham. The translation itself is a little older, but you see there on my Logos edition is the 2010 update, but I believe this was done in the 80s, maybe before that, or I need to do more research on the Emphasized Bible, and unfortunately, Bill Combs didn't talk very much about it. But I learned about this Bible from my brother-in-law, who's a Hebrew scholar, and he said, truly the most word-for-word translation is Rotherham's Emphasized Bible. So this says, "Now Boaz went up to the gate and sat him down there, and lo, the kinsman passing by, of whom Boaz had spoken. So he said," now, just that right there, that is not very good English, right there, what we just read. The kinsman passing by, of whom Boaz had spoken, so he said. This just not a very smooth way of saying things, but that is how the Hebrew says it, technically. "Turn aside and sit down here, such a one." Now, with such a one, I'm going to talk about this. In Hebrew, it's Poloni Almoni. That is just a fun, "Hey, sit here, Poloni Almoni." What's up, homie? That was kind of a fun, I wouldn't take it that dynamic of saying sup homie or anything, but It's just it is just fun in the Hebrew. Poloni Almoni. And so this one says he has to go dynamic with it. It doesn't say such a one. It says Poloni Almoni, which is a Hebrew way of saying, hey, buddy, guy, person. It's very difficult to translate. So it says such a one. And he turned aside and sat down. Then fetched he. And with each of these, he's being very Hebrew because in Hebrew, it's the verb first and then the person doing it. Said he, he turned aside, fetched the 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit ye down here. And they sat down. Then he said to the kinsmen, the parcel of land that was our brother Elimelech's is to be disposed of by Naomi, who hath returned out of the country of Moab. And I thought I would unveil thine ear. Again, a little weird to say that because he didn't have a veil over his ear, but that's what the Hebrew says is, I thought I would uncover your ear. Which is why I picked this passage, because I wanted to see what people would do with the Hebrewisms. So take it over in the presence of such as are here seated, and in presence, notice he doesn't put in the presence, because that's not there in the Hebrew, and in presence of the elders of my people. If thou wilt act as kinsman, act as kinsman. But if thou wilt not if thou wilt not so act, only tell me that I may know, for there is none who can set thee aside as kinsman, but I am after thee, and he said, I will act as kinsman. All right, very good. Getting a little less wooden is the American Standard Version. Now Boaz went up to the gate and sat him down there, and behold, the near kinsman of whom Boaz spake came by, unto whom he said, Ho, such a one. So here we have such a one again. Turn aside, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, Sit ye down here. And they sat down. And he said unto the near kinsman Naomi, that is come again out of the country of Moab, selleth the parcel of land, which was our brother Elimelech's. And I thought to disclose it unto thee, saying, Buy it before them that sit here, and before the elders of my people. Now, you might be wondering why it's using the thous and the these. It is following that singular plural of the King James, the American Standard Version. And they're wanting to keep that for accuracy's sake. Anytime there's a T with a thee or a thou, that's singular. Anytime there's a Y, you or your, it's plural. And the same goes for the King James so far as that goes. If thou wilt redeem it, but if thou wilt not redeem it, then tell me that I may know, for there is none to redeem it besides thee, and I am after thee. And he said, I will redeem it. All right, this is becoming a favorite of mine, the Legacy Standard Bible. Raise your hand if you heard of the Legacy Standard Bible. This is John MacArthur's new translation, basically, is the late John MacArthur. And so several scholars at Master's Seminary and some outside help as well. I added something down here. They adapted from the NASB Bible, the NASB 1960, 71, 77, 95. Not 2020, not the 2020 update. There was some stuff in the 2020 update of the New American Standard Bible that they didn't like. Somebody made a meme on the internet, which is where you make funny jokes with pictures. And they had you know how you can go into a Word document and ask it to find all of a particular word and say, anytime this comes up, just change it. And so they anytime it was Yahweh in the Hebrew, they made it actually say Yahweh in the LSB. And so that it control, find, replace, and the LSB update had that kid going, that's our update of the NASB and the Legacy Standard Bible. There you go. There were more updates than that, but that was, I don't know. The meme is fairly stereotypically accurate, I would say. It reads a whole lot like the New American Standard Bible 95 with a few little updates. Turn aside, my fellow is how the NASB takes it. So that's interesting. There are two words. It's still, I don't know. Poloni Almoni is two things. And so regardless, every English translation is going to have a hard time with Poloni Almoni. So NASB says, turn aside my fellow. And sit down, so they sat down. Naomi, who came back from the fields of Moab, has to sell the portion of the field which belonged to our brother Elimelech. So I thought to uncover this matter in your hearing. So you keep the uncovering aspect of it, you keep the ear aspect of it, and yet there's some Englishness. It's not as literal as the Emphasized Bible saying, hey, I want to uncover your ear. But yeah, so good approach, I'd say. If you will redeem it, redeem it. If no one redeems it, I want to redeem it next. There's the Legacy Standard Bible. King James Version, when we get to Poloni Almoni, it says, ho, such a one. So I just point out, Poloni Almoni is 2 words, and King James uses 4. But also, we talked about this. Greek is very precise. Usually, in English, we use fewer words than Greek, because I might say something like, the Steve is going to lead some music for us, if I was a Greek speaker. But in English, I don't need to say the Steve, because you guys all know that Steve is right there, and we don't use the direct article like that very much. So I don't call him the Steve, unless you want to be called, it does kind of have a ring to it, the Steve, the Steve Richard. All of that to say, with Hebrew, it's like they crunch everything together, and I almost wonder, it's like they were writing on clay tablets and stuff, so it's nice not to use as many letters. They already didn't use vowels and stuff, and then even the grammar itself is just crunched, like fit as much text on the tablet as possible. Maybe that's not exactly why they did what they did, but the grammar is that way. You could have a word that it means this person is going to do something in the future for him. 1 word. And it's fun times, Hebrew. So yeah, there you have, with Poloni Almoni, King James says, oh, such a one. And this is interesting, verse 4, and I thought to advertise thee. Now this is interesting. If you're reading that today, you might, is he saying, oh, I'm going to let other people know about what it is that you're seeking to do? But no, advertise, I would suspect, I haven't done this. Maybe some of you out there, if you have a subscription to the Oxford English Dictionary, can look up the old usage of advertise, but I suspect that in 1611, advertise meant, I thought I would let you know of this. I thought I would make you aware of this. I suspect that that's what advertise meant in 1611. I'd be welcome to be wrong, but I think that's probably what's going on. Okay, New King James. When it gets to, let's see, I thought to inform you. So this is so far the most dynamic that we've had so far as the uncovering of the ear. But we have information going on. Come aside, friend, for the Poloni Almoni. And so you can see how we're getting slightly more how we would talk as we progress. So that's the New King James, which is, of course, an update of sorts of the King James. One thing that the New King James loses, and it's a trade-off because it's more modern, it doesn't do the thee and thy thing anymore. So then you don't know if it's singular or plural, but then you don't have to deal with the these and thys and that kind of tripping over that the way that we don't really speak anymore. The Revised Standard Version, turn aside friend and sit down here. Something to be aware of with the Revised Standard Version, and some of these, I was talking actually with someone, I don't want to malign any ministries, so I'll just say a Bible translating organization, okay? And there's a bit of a badge of honor that I don't know, maybe I'm too much of a good Baptist or whatever. Whenever somebody's like, oh, we had 80 different denominations involved in our translation, I'm kind of like, I don't know. I'd be perfectly content with a Baptist translation. But it's interesting because whether I'm using ESV or NIV or KJV or NASB, it's not like I'm going to, oh, this Bible teaches this about baptism, but this Bible teaches this about baptism. But you're not going to find like a Baptist Bible translation. Occasionally, I would argue, you can find a Catholic Bible translation. And you can certainly find a Jehovah's Witness translation. They've taken all the deity of Christ intentionally out of it, saying a God instead of God, and lots of fun things. So there are, don't get me wrong, there are bad translations where the point of it, in general, translators like to be known for just letting the good ones anyway, like to be known for letting the text speak for itself. And so I know I had a conversation with a good dispensational translator, and he's like, I would like this. I am a dispensationalist, and as much as I would like to use this verse to make the point that I would like to make, that's not what the grammar says. I have to get my point for this point from these verses over here, not from this one. I would like this verse on my team too, but that's just not what the grammar says. I appreciate that, regardless of the theological perspective. That's the Tyndalian mindset of let the text speak for itself. And that's very, very a good approach to things. So with the Revised Standards and others, sometimes maybe falsely maligned, but sometimes some healthy criticism so far as too much ecumenical influence and that kind of thing. But also, I've not done an in-depth research on every single translation that I'm mentioning tonight. That would just take me forever, and I'm not going to do that. So just a grain of salt. I'll give some of my favorite ones later on. English Standard Version, I preach from this one. Turn aside, friend, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. I think the friend captures the familiarity, informality of the phrase. And let's see, by in the presence of those sitting here, where's that other phrase? Where he says, I thought I would, the uncovering of the ear. Where is that one? Verse 4, thank you. Yeah, I thought I would tell you of it. And say, which I thought I would tell you, maybe that starts to miss a little bit of the, See, for me, I like to know about the grammar stuff. I like to know about the uncovering of the ear and how they said it. So not my favorite in this particular instance, but it's still communicating the same idea. I thought I'd tell you about this. New Revised Standard Version, come over, friend, sit down here, very similar to ESV and Revised. Then he said, to the next of kin, Naomi, who has come back to the land, I thought I would tell you of it. Again, there's New Revised Standard Version. Now, let's talk about the Berean Study Bible and a concept. The Berean Study Bible, if you go to BibleHub.org, it is just free to use. And maybe you've never thought about this, of that how some Bibles are free to use and some Bibles are not free to use. It is technically illegal for me to hop on YouTube and not make any mention of the text that I'm using, and for me to just read the entirety of my ESV, make a YouTube video, and just put it out there. That is illegal for me to do. I could, however, do that with the King James. Not a problem, because there's no copyright on it. There's technically a copyright on the King James in Britain, but not in the United States, oddly enough. And the Britain one works a certain way, and you probably still wouldn't get in trouble, but it is still technically copyrighted in Britain. With the Berean Study Bible, and I know several other guys who are involved that are very passionate about this, and they would say, no copyright ought to be on any Bible. I have mixed feelings about this because, on the one hand, I want people doing a really, really quality job when it comes to Bible translation. And I have zero problem with paying people to translate the Bible. And the translators of the King James, they were paid. Jerome translating the Latin Vulgate, he was paid. The Bible translators today, I would suspect, even the translators of the Berean Study Bible, they were paid, but based on donations as opposed to salary, that sort of thing. And so I greatly appreciate that I can go on BibleHub.org, copy paste. We actually used it for our church devotionals. That's why we use it for church devotionals. That way I didn't have to sit around and ask for emails and stuff like, hey, can we use this much of your text in our devotional and all of that kind of thing. Technically, I wouldn't have had to anyway because we are not selling our church devotionals. But I don't know, that's just kind of a nice thing. And I greatly appreciate that. So when I put things online, we actually have, it's not a problem for us live streaming the ESV or anything like that. They actually say, yes, we want this used on Sundays and use it in your services and live stream it and all that. But they don't want you going and making money off of audio Bibles or using it for some online ministry or something like that. So yeah, I have mixed feelings on that. I greatly appreciate the sentiment of, hey, the Bible ought to be free. I like that idea. I also like the idea of, I don't want just any Joe Schmo saying, I got a Bible I want to toss out there that's for free. Like, I'd like to pay somebody who they do this for a living. They translate Bibles for a living. And unless you are putting in good, solid work every single day to do this, you're not just going to get good at Bible translating overnight. I mean, this is a full-time life job. And you ought to be, if you're a Bible translator, I believe that you ought to be paid for translating the Bible. The money's got to come from somewhere. And I believe this is one of those things that fits into the category of those that labor for the gospel ought to get their living by the gospel. I do think Bible translation would fit in the same category of pastors and teachers. And so I have no problem with the copyright thing, but I greatly appreciate people like whoever is putting together the Berean Study Bible. And I've read through a lot of it. It's pretty good. They actually also have a Berean literal Bible and a Berean more dynamic Bible reflecting the different ends of the spectrum here of formal and dynamic that we've been talking about. So BibleHub.org, that's their thing. Christian Standard Bible, come over here and sit down. Let's see. So yeah, that's what Boaz says to the person. That's what CSB does with the Poloni Almoni, and that's just a very standard way of saying it, isn't it? Come over here and sit down. Oh, tell me the footnote.
The footnote says, or said, come here, Mr. So-and-so.
Yeah. See, I have, let's talk about footnotes. I like them. It does make the page messy. But in fact, if you look at my 1611 replica in the back, footnotes all over the place. And that's because these guys were my kindred spirits. I mean, literally, Hebrew says, da-da-da. Or if it was an ambiguity, they would say, or, yeah, they put their translation in the text, and then in the margin they put, or this, of telling of another legitimate option. I like footnotes. And back there is, oh, not my favorite one. My favorite study Bible today is the CSB Study Bible. I really, really like its notes. I like its notes even more than the ESV Study Bible. It's tough saying that. It's a close race, but I like the CSB Study Bible the most. Sorry, another thing. Yeah, this is an interesting lesson to teach. Basically talking about all of my favorite toys, right? Study Bibles are a helpful thing, and when you talk about spending money, of all the things that you're going to spend money on, I think one of the things that you should spend money on, if you're going to spend money, is a good quality Bible that you are going to read every day. I do not think that you should spend an exorbitant amount of money on like 36 Bibles if there are other... Now, if you have that kind of money, that's better. I'd rather you spend money on that than like 12 million hot rods or whatever. Because you can increase your Bible study and knowledge and all of that. And now with electronic Bibles, you can have lots of translations very cheaply, lots of commentaries very cheaply, lots of ways to get information. But that's one of the issues that's a fair criticism to this idea of how many translations we have. A new believer says, okay, well, which one do I get? And unfortunately, it's kind of annoying. So I have a top 3, and I say, here's my. I actually have a top 4 or 5, but I say, here's my top 4 or 5, and here's why I like this one. And so if you like this feel, you'd probably prefer this, and if you like this philosophy of translating, you probably prefer this. And there's a really good case, honestly. And some of you are maybe like very much in the word for word camp. I feel you. You're my kindred spirits. But also, there's a very good case to be made for dynamic in the sense that, how do we talk? And that's what translation is. And God appears to have translated whenever he spoke to a Hebrew-speaking person in very common Hebrew. And he speaks to a Greek person in very common Greek. And so why would we not have Bible translation in very common... I'll get to more on that at the end. The Net Bible. This is a fun one. You could go to the netbible.org if you want to, and what you'll find on your phones, it'll be 2 different screens, but you have the text, and what they say is, come here, what's your name? And sit down. So they're trying to capture, and I would say that And I almost wonder if Boaz didn't know his name or if that's one of the intentions of Ruth in that point to say, here's a person whose name is not going to be recognized, as opposed to Boaz, who, what a guy, you know. And so, hey, what's your name? You know, say here. So that does capture the Poloni Almoni a little bit. The fun bit about the Net Bible isn't so much the translation itself as opposed to the notes. These are the notes on verse 1. Good stuff, huh? So the Hebrew idiom, Poloni Almoni, literally means such and such, or a certain one. Brown Driver Biggs, page 811 through 12, talks about the idiom, and the idiom is used where one wishes to be ambiguous. Here's two cross-references. Certainly Boaz would have known his relative's name, especially in such a small village, and would have uttered his actual name. However, the narrator refuses to record his name in the form of poetic justice because he refused to preserve Mahlon's name, lineage, by marrying his widow. This close relative, who is a literary foil for Boaz, refuses to fulfill the role of family and guardian as relegated to anonymity in a chapter otherwise filled with names in contrast to Boaz's prominence. Let's see, because the actual name of this relative is not recorded, the translation of this expression is difficult. Contemporary English style expects either a name or a title, but the purpose of the expression is to remove his name. This is usually supplied in modern translations as friend. Here's 5 examples, so examples, here's 2 more examples, and Mr. So-and-so or Mr. No Name. That's on Poloni Almoni. Next word. And it's just like, whoa. So verse 2 only gets this note. Hebrew, and he took 10 men from the elders of the town, giving the literal Hebrew. And then here's the notes on verse 3, and there's the notes on verse 4. And it's hilarious. So in case you were wondering, if you want the print version of the Net Bible, which you can buy, the text is that little square in the top. Everything else is the notes. So it's good stuff, huh? I enjoy that. That's from Mark chapter 1, the first 4 verses. Oh, it's good stuff. Love the Net Bible. A great commentary source, if you want to know why something was translated, they usually have a concise thing or two to say. NIV, come over here, my friend, and sit down. Notice it's adding some extra things there, just trying to make it flow naturally. That's sort of the point of the NIV, is make it very flowy. And I thought I should bring the matter to your attention. That's a phrase we use all the time, bring the matter to your attention. And then Boaz says at the end of the NIV here, he says, I'm next in line. The Good News translation, it starts to get very, at the very end here in verse 4, it says, if you don't want it, say so, because the right to buy it belongs first to you and then to me. That's adding a lot extra, but it's making it very clear as to what's going on. The NIV in that same verse says, I'm next in line. The New Living Translation I would describe as, it is a dynamic translation, but it does more than dynamic, even more so than the NIV. And I would even classify it as the best little concise translation plus commentary you could ask for. For instance, in Romans, somebody told me that the NLT isn't a word-for-word translation. And I'm like, well, they're right. And he's like, well, can you give me an example? And I literally just grabbed my NLT, flipped it open. First verse I saw, it was there in Romans 8. And it was talking about the law. And in the Greek, it says the law. Well, the NLT supplied the law of Moses. And I did some study on that verse. That is what that verse is talking about, the law of Moses. But of Moses is not in the Greek text. But that's a question you would have as a student of the Bible. Is this talking about just like the natural law? Or is this specifically talking about the law of Moses? And so NLT supplied it. And in that case, I believe the NLT was right. So there you have, some added extra words. So it's really a translation plus a commentary. I don't talk about the Amplified Bible at all, but the Amplified Bible does that to an amplified extreme, I'd say. They'll give a verb and then give 3 other ways you could translate that verb. It's like Strong's Concordance. It throws everything that Strong's Concordance has, all the options in every little slot. Makes for a very thick Bible and a very long read. So not my favorite, but an interesting study tool. Okay, the message. We got to read the message. Okay. Boaz went straight to the public square and took his place. Before long, the closer relative, the one mentioned earlier by Boaz, strolled by. Step aside, old friend, said Boaz. Take a seat. The man sat down. Boaz then gathered 10 of the town elders together and said, "Sit down here with us. We've got some business to take care of." And they sat down. It's just fun to read, you know. Boaz then said to his relative, "The piece of property that belonged to our relative Elimelech is being sold by his widow Naomi, who just returned from the country of Moab. I thought you ought to know about it." Hey, partner, you know, I just thought you ought to know. Buy it back if you want it. You can make it official in the presence of those sitting here or before the town elders. It was interesting. I was watching a Eugene Peterson interview on this, and he was making this case like, you know, a lot of people don't actually know their Hebrew and Greek, and they say they know it, but they don't know it. I've put work in this. I'm like, okay, this starts getting into the realm. Eugene Peterson has done some good work, but this starts getting into the realm of probably a little too much, a little too loose. So yeah, I would caution against using the Message Bible for regular devotion. Certainly for preaching, I wouldn't use the Message. Avoid really bad translations. And I already talked about the New World Translation. That's Jehovah's Witness. If something implies that Jesus is God, they don't want it in there. The Passion Translation, the issue I have with the Passion Translation is the guy's philosophy was, you know, God told me how to translate this. Always be careful with this whole God told me thing. It's, you know, and so that's it's like, okay, well, I guess if anyone changes from the translation that God told you to make, that's, you know, they're probably a heretic, I guess. That's not good. The Cotton Patch. We've got to talk about the Cotton Patch translation. It's just wild. The intent is to, you know, really reach the people on the fringe, and in this case, people on the fringe in the South, and this was the point of the Cotton Patch translation. This is from, an excerpt from Matthew 3, 4 through 6. This guy, John, was dressed in blue jeans and a leather jacket. He was living on cornbread and collard greens. Folks were coming to him from Atlanta and all over North Georgia and the backwater of the Chattahoochee. And as they owned up to their crooked ways, he dipped them in the Chattahoochee. The Cotton Patch translation right there. Just to get across the kind of thing Jesus was doing, you know. Not a good translation of the original Greek, let's say. Do be aware of really any sort of, like, oh, this is our denominationally approved translation. It's like, either you know what the original language says or what it's communicating, or you don't. And again, I just appreciate, rather than a denominationally approved translation, just let's find a good translator and have them translate. The secular translators of the Great Isaiah Scroll, if you look up the Great Isaiah Scroll online, you can click verse by verse and follow along in this ancient Hebrew that predates Jesus by 100 years. And these secular translators have represented the text fairly well. There's actually different camps so far as translations of whether or not I prefer to have a Bible translation done by believers, that if it's a translation that I would use. But also there are truly gender-neutral Bibles, and I don't mean that by saying people or everybody instead of man and mankind. The truly gender-neutral Bibles, there's something called the Feminist Bible, and it's odd. I'm not even going to give you the website link because I don't want to give them any airtime. But anytime there's a dude in the Bible, they change it to a woman. And it makes for a really confusing read. But what they've done is they've sent out biblical text to a bunch of feminists, and they have them like handwrite it and then send their nice handwritten, beautiful handwriting into the website of their updated, feminist Bible version, and it's strange. I'd say avoid it. These are my favorites these days, in no particular order. KJV, I grew up with it. We just sang a song based on it. Many verses I still have memorized in the King James. ESV, I find it easy to preach from. And there's a lot of accessibility with the ESV as well. It's one that you will commonly see in the stores, and I like that aspect of it as well. People know what the ESV is. The CSB, this is the one I use for our family devotions. Really, it is just wonderful to read. It doesn't go as dynamic as the NIV, but it's also not as wooden as the NASB, LSB, or ESV. So it really is a nice balance. Maybe they go overboard in saying, they have a little chart that says, here's here's readability, and here's accuracy, and NASB's gone over here, and NIV's gone over here, and we're the ones that are right here. Maybe that's a little heavy-handed in their advertising of that, but I do find that to be at least fairly the case. That there are several instances where they live up to their claim. NASB and LSB are going to prioritize accuracy over readability every time. And so for Bible study, if you want to know maybe a bit about what's going on in the Hebrew grammar or the Greek grammar, the NASB and the LSB are really good options. More recently, if I want something to read along with my Hebrew and I'm trying to learn Hebrew, I'll use the Emphasized Bible and it will help me learn my Hebrew. But it's ridiculously literal. I wouldn't recommend it to a non-Hebrew student for just like enjoyable Bible reading. And I give the NLT an honorable mention because I recognize that it jumps outside of the parameters sometimes, but it sort of says that even in its introductory material as to what its purpose is. And so, again, easy to read, and I would add with some concise commentary in there. I already talked about this as well. Let me share my favorite verse from the ESV in Ecclesiastes, and I've used it quite a bit recently, actually. Ecclesiastes 3:11, and it says, "God has put eternity in the heart of man, yet so that man cannot figure out what he has planned from beginning to end." And I think the ESV has that one nailed. I really, really like that one in the ESV, Ecclesiastes 3:11. I would just close with it, consider using different translations for different reasons. If you want to get a good idea of what's going on and you want to read like 26 chapters straight, consider reading a Bible translation that flows really, really nicely in English. If you want to dive down into like tiny details and that and go very, very slowly, consider something like the NASB or the LSB, and that can be very helpful for you. And as well as if you're in that sort of situation, one of the things I actually discourage, I hope I don't hurt any feelings by this, I don't recommend using Strong's Concordance. Rather than using Strong's Concordance, I would recommend using multiple Bible translations. Because with Strong's Concordance, you can say, oh, here's a root word behind it, and all that Strong's does is they say, okay, here are the different ways that this word has been translated. But it doesn't give you any of the context for why one of those options might be chosen as opposed to another option. And so where I've seen preachers and Bible interpreters go wrong with Strong's Concordance is to say, oh, well, I like option 4. Option 4 fits really nicely within my view here of this text I'm preaching, and so I like option 4 best, so I'll say, well, Strong's Concordance says it can be translated this way, and I assert my point. The problem is, just like with English grammar, it's not all about the definition of a root word. You have to zoom out and see sometimes more of the context in which that's used to say, oh, whenever it's preceded by this phrase and followed by this phrase, it means option 3. And there are some unfortunately more expensive resources that will say, okay, here's this usage and why it's translated this way, and here's this usage and why it's translated this way. But rather than spending money on really, really expensive Greek or Hebrew lexicons, which my two favorite that I use are over 100 a piece for brand new lexicons, consider using multiple Bible translations. And a lot of these you can get free online. I believe it's Bible Gateway, BibleHub.org. A lot of these places you can compare multiple Bible translations. And I strongly recommend that as opposed to something like a Strong's Concordance. Any other comments or thoughts before we close out the night? Yeah?
What about commentaries?
Uh-huh. I'm in favor of commentaries, yes. Yeah, so I usually, these days, because I'm trying to do a lot of work in Hebrew and Greek, I try to do everything myself first. But then I'll go and, I'll just say when I'm prepping a sermon, okay? I'll take a look at least 4 or 5 commentaries, and then I'll look up 2 or 3 speakers, preachers that I respect the most, and try to listen to them and see if anybody there says something to where I realize, whoa, I was way off base when I concluded this. And commentaries, I would say, are a great check. Obviously, don't let them become a substitute for just plain out spending time in the Word. But the Bible even encourages to have a multitude of counselors and a multitude of teachers and in this sort of situation where we surround ourselves. And when you're talking about a commentary, you're talking about someone who's spent hours plus in each little verse that you're looking at. So there's a lot of value in Bible commentaries. And I could give you slides and slides of commentaries that I recommend. There's actually a site called bestcommentaries.com, I think, or .org, and it's a good resource. And then I have, for dispensational issues, I have different commentaries I recommend, and we could talk about commentaries for a long time, but I do enjoy them and I use them. Any other questions or comments about translation? Anyone want to throw down their favorite, the favorite to end all favorites? Yeah.
I appreciate when you study, especially if you know a little bit, tiny bit about original languages. The translators work, what they've done, like you said, that they need to be full-time because
Yeah.
they nailed it
Yeah.
so many times. And then like one, I can't remember the passage, but sometimes there are two ways, legitimate ways that could be translated. I found one where New American Standard translated one way, ESV translated another
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
One, they just chose different ways, so you kind of get the truth from both of them.
Right, exactly.
That's why it's good that use different translations.
Yeah.
But what I appreciate, especially about the New American Standard, is that in a certain context, that same word in the original is translated the same way in English
Yeah.
every time.
Yeah.
So you get an idea of what is important to
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
When we do our Wednesday night Bible studies, 1 Corinthians 1, what comfort was 10 times in 3 or 4 verses or whatever. And I imagine in the Greek it was the same way.
Yeah.
But I didn't
Yeah.
look. That, to me, that's so important because in my way of thinking, what the translator should be trying to get is, like you said, let God, let the text, but really
Yeah.
it's let God speak for himself.
Yeah, exactly. And at this point, at this point, I almost think, honestly, in English, we have too much. One of the really cool things that I was able to witness is just a guy tell his story. Their church had some extra money to throw around, and so what did they do? They literally just adopted a Bible translation. There was a Bible translation need in another language, so they just threw $200,000 at it and just did it. Isn't that fun? It was like, we helped do this Bible translation. And I was like, life goals. That was cool. I asked a lot of questions to pastors. I said, suppose you had like unlimited resources. What are some of the things you do with that? Well, one of the guys I mentioned, I think I agree. It's like, just like anytime someone says, oh, this language doesn't have a Bible yet, can we get this going? Yep. Just take it, because you have to pay the translators to go over there and meet with the people and do all, it's expensive work. And yeah, so if you ever go to the Museum of the Bible, they have these walls of like all the translation, all the languages that we know about specifically, and like here is a people group that does not have the Bible in their own language. And it's like, and in English we have got like hundreds of translations, and it's just, okay, we need to start in a different direction. When the LSB came out, it's like, okay, I appreciate it, but honestly, I'm just like, yeah, we have too many. I think we're good on English translations probably for another 50, 100 years at least. I wish translations wouldn't update like every 10 years. I think it ought to be like 50 or 100 years. Because languages do change, just not that often. So, yeah. Other thoughts? Yeah, Lynn? Yeah. Yep. And there are some sticky issues too that you run into, cultural issues and stuff once you try to start getting a translation going and somebody's saying, oh, I'd like to be involved. And it's like, actually, we don't want you involved. So there are some sticky issues. But yeah, pray for that because we need to proclaim the gospel to every tongue and nation. There are tongues that do not have a Bible in their language yet. So looking forward to seeing what we can do about that. That's why I always like the idea of like starting a little army of child translators and like tackle these. Anyways, I get weird ideas about that. But all right, let's pray. Father, thank you so much for, especially in English and your grace, you've seen fit to give us a lot of tools to help us understand your word better. And we pray that those would be just that, tools and helps, and that it would not add to the confusion and the chaotic mess of people not knowing in which direction they ought to be able to go. Thank you for the philosophies that went behind so many of these quality translations. And more than anything, I pray that we would read your word and understand it and obey it and follow it. It burdens my heart to see the controversy that has surrounded and divided solid Christian brothers over these issues, when really there's just a feast to be had. And I pray that we would be about what is most important, and that we would seek out issues carefully and study well. And we thank you for what you've given us in your word. It truly is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. I pray that we would treat it with that reverence. In Christ's name, amen.